According to legend, the family name Armstrong was bestowed upon a Celtic clan after a leading member displayed an amazing feat of heroism in battle using just one of his arms. If that's true, it might suggest where, centuries later, pioneer pilot and astronaut Neil Armstrong got his sense of adventure from. By the time of the first manned-moon mission, Apollo 11 on the 22nd of July 1969, he'd already cheated death on at least 7 occasions, and all in vehicles provided to him by the American government. Neil Alden Armstrong was born in Ohio on August 5, 1930, of Irish, Scottish and German stock. He got the flight bug when he attended the Cleveland Air Races at age 2, and he took to the air for the first time when he was 5. He got his student flight certificate at age 16 and made his first ever solo flight before he could even drive a car. His first brush with death came in August 1951 when the 21-year-old Armstrong was serving with the US Navy in the skies over North Korea. He'd first flown a Grumman F-9 F-2B Panther just 5 days earlier, renowned as the first US jet fighter that operated well from aircraft carriers. But his plane, number 125122, was hit by anti-aircraft fire whilst he undertook a low bombing run. He struck a pole that was sticking up out of the ground and it took off a section of his right wing. Aiming to crash land in the sea, he ejected just before losing control, but high winds blew the ejector seat back onto shore. He was rescued unharmed and went on to fly nearly 80 more missions during the Korean War. Armstrong left the Navy in August 1952 and studied for his Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees, achieving some of the highest marks ever noted. In 1955, he applied to join the High-Speed Flight Station at Edwards Air Force Base, operated by NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, which later became NASA in 1958. He took off on his first experimental flight on his very first day at Edwards. His next near-fatal experience came in March 1956 as he was co-piloting a Boeing B-29 Superfortress that was carrying a Douglas D-5582 skyrocket slung under its fuselage. During the flight, number 4 engine of the Superfortress suddenly shut down. Now, if this occurred, it was normal practice to lock the propeller to stop it from spinning out of control and to prevent the risk of disintegration from overspeed, but on this occasion, it refused to lock. The B-29 couldn't land until the skyrocket had launched. They had a choice: speed up to release the rocket and risk damage in the plane, or slow down to save the propeller. They chose to speed up and launch the rocket. Just as the rocket launched, the propeller exploded, launching its blades through the number 3 engine, on through the fuselage and into the number 2 engine on the other side of the plane. Amazingly, with just a few control cables still connected to Armstrong's side of the cockpit, the B-29 managed to limp back to base with just one of its 4 engines working. Armstrong's first journey in a rocket plane nearly ended in disaster too. He took off in the Bell X-1B in August 1957, and all went well until he tried to land. As he touched down, the front landing gear disintegrated and he had no option but to guide the plane into a controlled crash. Once again, he walked away uninjured. The fearless Armstrong evaded death 3 more times in 1962. In April of that year, he flew a North American X-15 hypersonic rocket plane to an altitude of 207,000 feet, the highest any human had reached. But a fault in the control system sent the X-15 into a nosedive, and he struggled to regain control because at those altitudes, aerodynamic design has almost no effect. Armstrong missed his landing strip as he overshot it at 2,000 miles an hour and finally got the X-15 onto the ground some 40 miles from where he should have landed. 4 days later, he was in trouble yet again, this time alongside fellow test pilot icon Chuck Yeager. The pair flew a Lockheed T-33 Shooting Star into a dry lake bed with the aim of seeing whether it could be used as an emergency landing site. It couldn't. Heavy rains meant that the lake bed wasn't dry and the plane got stuck in mud. Armstrong and Yeager later tried to blame each other for the incident. By the time Armstrong joined the US space program, he'd already lived through at least 6 near-death experiences. However, He very nearly didn't make it into NASA because the application to join arrived after the deadline. Fortunately, a friend recognised his paperwork and slipped it into the receive pile when no one was looking. And so, in September 1962, Armstrong became the first civilian member of the astronaut corps. The Gemini 8 mission of March 1966 was his first space mission and America's 12th manned space flight. As command pilot, he and David Scott were to undertake the first ever docking of 2 vehicles in space. But the mission ended in the first ever critical failure of an American spacecraft, and it happened during radio blackout when the astronauts had no way of communicating with mission control. After several hours of carefully lining up Gemini 8 with the Agena target vehicle and finally making a connection, the combined spacecraft began spinning uncontrollably in a nose-about tail yawing motion. Armstrong activated his Orbit Attitude and Maneuvering System, or OMS thrusters, and brought the movement under control, only for it to start again almost immediately. Following instructions to abort the docking attempt if anything went wrong, and concerned that the motion might cause an explosion in the Agena's fuel tanks, Scott initiated the undock command, whilst Armstrong used the Gemini thrusters to move away from the other vehicle. But that threw the Gemini into an end-over-end pitching movement, with the astronauts at risk of blacking out from the centrifugal forces as they endured 1 revolution per second, or 60 RPM. Armstrong regained control using the RCS, or Re-Entry Control System thrusters, after which they discovered that the number 8 ohms thruster was refusing commands to shut down. Mission rules stated that as soon as the RCS thrusters had fired, the flight should be aborted, so Armstrong began preparations for an emergency landing which took place 600 miles south of Yokosuka in Japan, 10 hours and 41 minutes after takeoff. On May 6, 1968, Armstrong was using the Lunar Landing Training Vehicle, also known as the Flying Bedstead, in preparation for the moon landings in the lunar module. But because that would only work in the moon's low gravity, it couldn't be used here on Earth. The LLTV was basically a jet engine in a framework with thrusters to control its attitude, and flying it was described as like trying to balance a dinner plate on a broom handle. During the flight, one of the thrusters ran out of fuel and the LLTV lost control. Armstrong ejected at a height of just 200 feet before it crashed into a ball of flames. Having just 4 seconds on his full parachute, he suffered just a cut lip on landing. Of course, Armstrong's most famous mission was as commander of Apollo 11 in July 1969. And whilst he had to take control of the Eagle lander due to an overloaded flight computer as it approached the surface of the moon, and a broken ignition switch threatened to strand them on the moon before its return to Earth, he was never again in as much danger as he had been during that Gemini mission, or during the more than 900 flights as a test pilot. That's a remarkable survival rate for a man whose family gained their name through an act of strength in an arm. And throughout his remarkable career, it seems as though some of his ancestors were looking after him as he secured his place in history as the first human to step foot on the moon. So thanks for watching, and I'd just like to say that this episode's shirt was the Newport Waves by Madcap England and is available at atomretro.com with worldwide shipping from here in the UK. So thanks for watching, and don't forget that we have the Curious Droid Facebook page and group where you can suggest new ideas for videos. The link is in the channel page, and you can also translate any of the videos with the community contributions. So as always, thanks for watching, and please subscribe, rate and share.